My parents threw me out for refusing to follow the path they laid out for me, and now I own their house, tripled the rent, and watch them struggle as they once made me struggle. I was 22, juggling college classes and a low-paying job at a rundown grocery store that barely covered my expenses. My parents, Robert and Susan, were always on my case, acting like they owned every decision I made. They had this rigid vision of my future, and they weren't subtle about shoving it down my throat. They thought they had all the answers, completely oblivious to what I actually wanted. One evening, we were at the kitchen table, just another ordinary night. I was picking at the dry, overcooked chicken my mom had made, trying to avoid trouble because any comment would spark a lecture about my ingratitude. Out of the blue, my dad, with his usual patronizing tone, asked, "So how's that business degree coming along?" I knew this was coming, but I wasn't prepared for the fallout. My pulse quickened, my stomach churned, but I had to get it over with. I set my fork down, staring at the mound of carrots I'd been pushing around like a kid. "Actually," I said, my voice unsteady, "I've been thinking about changing my major." The room went dead quiet, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock in the hall. I knew I was in deep trouble. "Changing your major?" My dad nearly choked on his food, his face turning a shade of red that only showed up when he was furious. "Yeah, I want to switch to computer science," I said, trying to sound confident. It felt like I was facing a judge and jury. Before I could elaborate, my mom cut in with her typical snide tone. "Jake, you've never been one for big decisions," she said with a fake smile like it was a harmless jab. But we all knew it wasn't. That's how she slipped in her insults, always cloaked in a laugh or a quip. I sat there biting back the rage building inside me. I wanted to scream that they were wrong, but I knew it would only escalate into a shouting match. My dad wasn't done, though. He slammed his knife down, making the dishes clatter. "Computer science? Are you insane? Business is where the money is. You're throwing your life away on some foolish whim." I tried to reason with them. "It's not a whim, Dad. I'm passionate about it, and I think I could excel at it." "Passion," he snapped, cutting me off. "Passion doesn't pay the bills, Jake. You're being irresponsible. You need to plan for your future, not chase fleeting interests." My mom nodded in agreement, fanning the flames. "You're not a kid anymore. You can't just mess around with your life." That's when it sank in. They didn't care about my dreams, not even a little. To them, I was just a pawn in their perfect plan, and any deviation was a personal failure. They didn't even consider that I might know what was right for me. After dinner, I stormed to my room, slammed the door, and collapsed on my bed. It felt like a boulder was sitting on my chest. I grabbed my phone and called Emily, the one person who always understood me. "How'd it go?" she asked, already sensing the answer. "Like a total train wreck," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "They lost it when I mentioned the switch. It's like I said I was running away to join a band or something." She sighed on the other end. "Jake, you've got to stand up for yourself. This is your life, not theirs. You don't owe them your future." "I know. But they're my parents," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "It's not that simple." "I get it," she said gently. "But you're 22. You're not a child anymore. You need to start living for you, or they'll keep controlling everything." Lying there, staring at the ceiling, her words hit hard. She was right. I was an adult, and it was time I acted like one. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of fear and resolve. I couldn't keep letting them dictate my life. So I marched downstairs, heart pounding, and found them lounging in the living room, glued to the TV. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm despite the nerves. My dad muted the television, and they both turned to me, expecting some grand revelation. In a way, it was. "I've made up my mind. I'm switching to computer science." My dad's eyes narrowed. "No, you're not." I held my ground. "Yes, I am. I'm an adult, and this is my decision." For a fleeting moment, I thought they might back off. But then my mom stood, arms crossed, her voice icy. "If you're such an adult, then you can fend for yourself. You have 24 hours to pack and leave." I stood there, stunned, my brain struggling to process her words. "What?" I finally stammered. "You're not serious." "Oh, we're serious," my dad growled. "You want to call the shots? Fine, but you're on your own." I don't even recall walking back to my room. All I felt was betrayal, like they'd been waiting for a reason to ditch me. I was their son, and they were tossing me out like trash. I called Ryan, my best friend, the second I got to my room, my voice shaking. "Dude, they kicked me out. I don't know what to do." Without hesitation, he said, "Pack your stuff. You're crashing with me." As I stuffed my clothes into a bag, it hit me. I was homeless. My own parents had discarded me. But, as twisted as it sounds, part of me felt a strange relief. For the first time, I was free from their grip. I just didn't know what that freedom would cost me yet. The days after getting kicked out were a haze. I was staying at Ryan's apartment, trying to wrap my head around everything, but it felt like my world had been turned upside down. One moment I'm arguing about my major, and the next, I'm without a home. It didn't seem real, like I was living someone else's nightmare. Ryan's place was okay, a cramped one-bedroom that smelled like stale takeout and sweat, but I couldn't complain. I had a place to sleep and a friend who wouldn't kick me out. But it was tight. I was on his creaky old couch that groaned with every move. I had no other options, though. Going back to my parents and begging wasn't happening. I tried to focus on school, but it was nearly impossible. Every time I opened a textbook, my mind would wander back to that night. It was like I couldn't escape the fact that I had no real home anymore. Money was another issue. My savings were dwindling fast, and I couldn't take on more hours with classes and this mess weighing me down. Emily kept trying to cheer me up, but even she couldn't fix this. One day, she suggested we grab lunch to clear my head. We went to a cheap deli near Ryan's place. I hadn't been eating much since I left home, so I figured it might help. "How are you holding up?" she asked, munching on her sandwich. I shrugged. "Not great. School's slipping, and my money's almost gone. I don't know how much longer I can do this." She gave me that pitying look I'd been getting from everyone. "You're doing what you can, Jake. This is just a rough patch." I gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah, a patch the size of a canyon." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You'll figure it out. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for." Her words were kind, but they didn't change the fact that I was stuck. It felt like I was drowning, and no amount of encouragement could pull me out. After lunch, I went back to Ryan's and tried to study, but the more I stared at my laptop, the more I realized I was falling behind. Dropping out started creeping into my thoughts, even though I hated the idea. I couldn't keep up with everything. I was barely staying afloat as it was. A few weeks later, things hadn't improved. My savings were gone, and I knew I couldn't keep freeloading off Ryan forever. The day I dropped out of college was one of the lowest points of my life. It felt like I was giving up on everything I'd worked for. Sitting in the registrar's office, signing the forms, I felt like a failure. I'd always thought I'd be the first in my family to graduate, but that dream was crumbling, just like everything else. Walking out of that office, it hit me. I was on my own, no degree, no plan, and barely any cash. That night, I sat on Ryan's couch, staring at my phone, wondering how I'd ended up here. Emily called, checking in as always. "So, what's next?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm looking for work, but nothing's sticking. It's like every door's slamming shut." There was a pause, and I could tell she was searching for the right words. "You're not giving up, are you?" "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice breaking. "I dropped out today." "Oh, Jake," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. But this isn't the end. You'll find something." I wanted to believe her, but hope was hard to come by. I spent the next few days applying to every job I could find, but nothing panned out. The only place that gave me a shot was Sonny's Diner, a grimy little spot that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. It wasn't my dream job, but it was something. They needed someone to cook burgers and scrub floors, and I needed money. So I took it. The hours were brutal, the pay was awful, but it kept me going. I spent my days covered in grease, flipping patties while my boss, Carl, shouted orders like a drill sergeant. He was a tough guy who only cared about profits, but he noticed when I put in the effort. About a month in, Carl pulled me aside during a quiet shift. "Kid, you work hard. Want some extra hours?" I wiped the sweat from my brow, trying to seem interested. "Yeah, sure. What's the deal?" "I've got a friend who needs a night watchman at an office downtown. Pays better than here. You up for it?" I didn't even think twice. "Count me in." Just like that, I was working 2 jobs, cooking by day and guarding an empty building by night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. Sleep became a rare treat, and most nights I was running on empty, barely able to stay awake. But I had no choice. I had to keep going. Emily kept sending me tech job listings, trying to get me back on track, but I didn't have the time or energy to apply. My life was about survival now, not dreams or passions. It was about making it through each day, every night. Sitting in that dark, empty office building, staring at the city lights flickering outside, I couldn't help but wonder how my life had ended up like this. Just months ago, I had goals, a future. Now I was just trying to get by, one grueling shift at a time. And the worst part? I didn't see a way out. Working 2 jobs was brutal, no sugarcoating it. The diner was a greasy mess, and the night shifts at the office were mind-numbingly dull. I was surviving on a few hours of sleep, chugging energy drinks like they were my lifeline, and carrying my life in a worn-out backpack. But at least I had some income. It wasn't much, but it kept me afloat. Ryan never said it outright, but I could tell he was glad I could chip in for rent. I didn't want to be the guy mooching off his friend while his life fell apart, so I made sure to contribute what I could. I was still on his couch, but at least I wasn't a complete leech. Then, out of nowhere, things started to shift. Call it luck, or the universe cutting me a break. But one day, while I was flipping burgers at the diner, a guy came in for lunch. He didn't stand out at first, just another tired customer. After his meal, he came to pay, and as I handed him his change, he noticed the laptop screen I had open behind the counter. I'd been messing with some coding problems during my break, just to keep my skills sharp. He raised an eyebrow. "You into coding?" he asked, his tone curious but casual. I nodded, trying not to seem too eager. "Yeah, I've been teaching myself, hoping to make something of it one day." He smiled slightly. "Well, my company's looking for entry-level tech folks. Nothing big, but it's a start." I stared at him, not sure if I'd heard right. "Wait, for real?" "Yeah," he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Send me your resume. I'll put in a good word." He handed me his business card, and my hands were practically shaking as I took it. It felt like a tiny spark of hope, something I hadn't felt in ages. That night, I didn't care how exhausted I was from the double shifts. I went back to Ryan's, opened my laptop, and threw together a resume. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I sent it to the guy before I could second-guess myself, then tried not to get my hopes up. Days passed without a response, and I started to think he was just being polite. But then one night during my security shift, my phone pinged with an email from the company. I stared at it for a solid minute, too nervous to open it. When I finally did, it wasn't a rejection. It was an interview invite. I couldn't believe it. I'd gone from slinging burgers and patrolling empty hallways to a shot at an actual tech job. The interview was low-key. I borrowed one of Ryan's nicer shirts and took the bus to their office. It was a small startup, nothing fancy, but it felt like a different universe compared to the diner. The guy from the diner, whose name was Mark, greeted me and introduced me to his boss, Laura. Laura was tough but fair. She asked about my background, and I was honest. I didn't have a degree, but I'd been teaching myself coding and IT. I showed her some small projects I'd done, and she didn't seem overly impressed at first. Then she gave me a technical problem to solve on the spot, something I'd never tackled before. My nerves spiked, but I remembered all those late nights studying code, working through problems just because I loved it. I took a deep breath and dove in, trying to stay calm under pressure. When I finished, Laura glanced at my work. She didn't say much, just nodded and looked at Mark. "He's got promise," she said. "Let's give him a try." I didn't know how to react. I wanted to leap out of my chair, but I just sat there, trying to stay cool, even though my heart was racing. I started the next week as an entry-level IT tech. It wasn't glamorous, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I wasn't frying burgers or sitting in a dark office at 2 a.m. I was doing something I loved. Laura and Mark were patient but pushed me to keep learning. They didn't coddle me, and that's exactly what I needed. I kept the diner and security jobs for a bit just to be safe, which meant I was still burning the candle at both ends. Sleep was scarce, and most mornings I felt like I'd been run over. Emily was my lifeline through it all. She kept sending me job leads and checking in, making sure I didn't lose myself in the grind. Whenever I felt like I was about to crack, she'd remind me why I was doing this, that I was building something for myself. After a few months, I hit a wall. I couldn't keep up 2 jobs and stay sane, so I went to Carl at the diner and told him I had to quit. He wasn't happy, but he got it. "Good luck, kid," he said with a rare moment of warmth. "You're a hard worker. You'll be okay." Walking out of that diner for the last time felt like shedding a heavy coat. I still had the night security gig, but at least I wasn't killing myself as fast. At the startup, I dove in head first. I spent every free moment learning new skills, taking on projects, and absorbing everything I could. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something real, something that was mine. There were days I doubted myself, wondering if I was chasing a fantasy, but every time I solved a tough problem or finished a project, I felt that spark again, that drive I'd lost for so long, and slowly, I started to see a future I actually wanted. For the first time in ages, that felt like enough. A few months into the job, things started to feel different. Not bad, just new. I was doing work I genuinely enjoyed, and I wasn't dragging myself through each day just to survive. Coding, troubleshooting. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. Something I'd fought hard to get. One afternoon, I was deep in some code when Laura came by my desk. She wasn't one for small talk, which I appreciated. She leaned against my desk and said, "Jake, I've been watching you these past few months. You've got talent, but you're playing it too safe." I blinked, caught off guard. Too safe? How so? She gave me a knowing look, like she was waiting for me to figure it out. "You're good at what you do, but you're sticking to your comfort zone. You're not pushing yourself. That's fine for now, but it won't get you far in this industry. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't wrong. I'd been so grateful to have a stable job that I hadn't wanted to rock the boat. Look, she went on, you've got the skills. If you want to stand out, take on the scary stuff. That's how you grow. I nodded, her words sinking in. This wasn't like my parents' lectures about my wasted potential. This was someone who saw what I could do and wanted me to do more. So I took her advice. I started volunteering for tougher projects, ones I wasn't sure I could handle. There were moments I felt way out of my depth, but every time I figured something out, it was worth it. One day, Laura gave me a huge project for a new client. A big deal that could make or break my reputation at the company. I was nervous but excited. This was the kind of challenge I needed to prove I could handle more. I poured everything into it. Late nights, weekends, every ounce of energy I had. When I finally turned it in, I felt like I'd just climbed a mountain. I was drained but proud. A few days later, Laura called me into her office. I sat down, bracing myself, half expecting I'd messed up, but she had a different look this time. Jake, the client loved your work, she said. They're signing off on everything. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Really? She nodded, a small smile creeping in. You nailed it. Keep this up, and you're going places. I walked out of her office feeling like I could take on the world. For the first time in forever, I wasn't just getting by. I was excelling. Emily noticed the change too. When we'd go out, I'd talk about my projects instead of complaining about dead-end jobs. She'd listen, really listen, like she could see I was finally where I belonged. One night, after a brutal week, we were chilling on her couch. She looked at me with this warm smile and said, I knew you'd get here, Jake. Maybe not the way you thought, but you're doing it. I didn't know how to respond. She'd been there through the worst of it, when I was broke, lost, and doubting everything. Thanks, I said, my voice rough. I don't think I'd have made it without you. She laughed, brushing it off. You would have. You just needed a nudge. Maybe she was right, but having her in my corner made it all easier. Things kept moving up from there. Work got busier, but in a good way. I was taking on bigger projects, getting better at my craft, and people were noticing. Laura kept throwing me challenges, and every time I nailed one, I felt more confident. Money was still tight, but I wasn't stressing about bills anymore. I'd quit the security job, and while I wasn't rich, I wasn't scraping by either. For the first time, I felt stable, like I was standing on solid ground. One day, Laura called me into her office again. I figured it was another project, but she had a serious look. Jake, let's talk about your future here, she said, her tone steady. I raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. Okay, she leaned back. You've done great work, and I think you're ready for more. I want to offer you a full-time position. I sat there, stunned. Full-time. No more side hustles, no more scraping by. This was what I'd been working toward. I don't know what to say, I said, a grin breaking through. She smiled back. Just say yes. And I did. Walking out of that office, I felt like a weight had lifted. All the stress, the sleepless nights, the doubt, it was worth it. I'd made it, not the way I'd planned, but I'd made it. And that felt incredible. Getting that full-time gig was like stepping into a new chapter. For the first time, I felt like my work mattered, not just to me, but to the people around me. I didn't have to worry about making ends meet or picking up some terrible side job. This was real stability. But life doesn't just get easy because you hit a milestone. Work got intense, crazy intense. Laura wasn't joking about more responsibilities. I was thrown into bigger projects, leading teams for the first time, and dealing with deadlines that seemed impossible. Some days I'd stare at my task list and wonder how I'd survive it. But I pushed through. I had to. Every day was a test, but it was the kind I'd been craving, something that made me feel alive. Even though I was still learning, people trusted me to deliver. That meant everything. One afternoon, Laura called me into her office again. I always got a little nervous when she did that, like I was back in school waiting to hear if I'd passed a test. She looked serious, and for a moment, I thought I'd screwed up. Jake, I've got a new project for you, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. I flipped through it, scanning the details. It was for a major client, a company wanting a complete IT system overhaul. It was massive, way bigger than anything I'd tackled before. My stomach flipped with a mix of excitement and fear. This is huge, I said, trying to sound confident. Laura nodded. It is. But I think you're ready. I want you to lead it. Lead it? That hit me hard. I'd worked my butt off, sure, but leading something this big was a whole new level. I won't let you down, I said, feeling the weight of her trust. I know you won't, she replied, giving me one of her rare smiles. The next few weeks were some of the most intense of my life. I was practically living at the office, working late nights and weekends to make sure everything was perfect. My team was solid, but the pressure was real, and I wasn't about to drop the ball. Emily was a rock star during all of it. I was barely around, and when I was half dead from exhaustion. She'd bring me food at the office, sit with me while I worked, and remind me to breathe. "You're going to burn out if you keep this up," she'd say, worry in her eyes. But I couldn't slow down. Not yet. This project was everything, and I knew if I could pull it off, it would change my life. Not just my career, but who I was. I had something to prove, to myself more than anyone else. The night before the big client presentation, I barely slept. I kept going over every detail, checking and rechecking, making sure nothing was out of place. It felt like the past year's worth of struggle was leading to this moment, and I was standing on the edge of something huge. The next morning, I walked into the conference room, heart racing. The clients were there, all serious in their suits, and I set up my presentation, trying to calm my nerves. Laura was there too, watching me closely. I took a deep breath, reminded myself I'd prepared for this, and launched into it. It wasn't flawless. I tripped over a few words, fumbled a slide or two, but I kept going. I answered their questions, laid out the plan, and showed them why this was the right move for them. When it was over, I stood there, waiting for their response, my palms sweaty. They sat in silence for what felt like forever, flipping through the documents, murmuring to each other. My stomach was in knots, expecting the worst, but then the head of their IT team spoke up. "This looks solid," he said, nodding. "We're on board." I couldn't believe it. I'd done it. I wanted to jump up and cheer, but I kept it professional, nodding like it was no big deal, even though I was screaming inside. After the meeting, Laura pulled me aside. "Nice job," she said, that rare smile back. "You earned this." Her praise hit me as hard as the client's approval. I'd just pulled off the biggest project of my life, and it felt like I'd crossed some invisible finish line. All the fights with my parents, getting kicked out, dropping out, working dead-end jobs, it all led to this. That night, I left the office, the weight of the past few months finally lifting. I didn't care that I'd be back at it the next morning. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I called Emily on my way home, buzzing with excitement. "Babe, we nailed it! They loved it! We're moving forward!" She laughed, and I could hear the pride in her voice. "I knew you would. I'm so proud of you, Jake." Her words made it all feel even more real. It wasn't just about the job. It was about everything I'd fought for, everything I'd given up to get here. I wasn't the scared kid who got thrown out anymore. I was building something, on my terms. The future didn't feel so daunting anymore. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving, and that was worth everything. A few years after that project, my life looked nothing like I'd expected. I'd gone from barely getting by to climbing the ranks in the tech world, and eventually, I took a leap I never thought I would. I started my own company. It wasn't a snap decision. I'd spent years building my skills, saving money, and making connections. When the time felt right, I went for it. Starting my own business was tough. Sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and the constant fear of failure. But I had this gut feeling it was my path, so I kept at it, grinding every day. Slowly, things started to fall into place. I landed contracts, built a small but strong team, and the company started to grow. Within a couple of years, we were making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. I wasn't flipping burgers or guarding empty buildings anymore. I was running a successful business, watching it expand every month. It felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. But it was mine. I'd built it from the ground up. Around the time the company took off, Emily and I started talking about buying a house. We'd been renting for years, and it felt like the right moment to find something permanent, a place to call ours. We began browsing listings, checking out open houses on weekends, and imagining the kind of home we wanted to build our lives in. One day, while scrolling through real estate listings. So what are your thoughts on this story? Do you agree with what happened, or do you see it differently? Let us know your opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. See you in the next one.